Zarthik adjusted the neural broadcasting array one final time, his four-fingered hands moving with practiced precision across the alien controls. The massive Corvan warrior stood nearly 8 feet tall, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the harsh lights of his hunting platform. Across the galaxy, millions of beings would witness what he was about to do. "Citizens of the Galactic Collective," his voice rumbled through the translation matrix. "Today you will see why the Corvan Empire maintains its position as the premier military force in known space. I have selected what these primitive humans call their elite warrior for today's demonstration." The camera drones circled him like metallic vultures, broadcasting his image to countless worlds. Zarthik had built his reputation on these live hunts, always selecting the supposedly finest warriors from species that dared challenge Corvan superiority. Today would be no different. "The human military designation is Navy SEAL," he continued, pulling up holographic data streams. "According to their own records, this specimen has completed what they laughably call special operations across 17 different conflict zones. They believe this makes him formidable." Zarthik's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his kind. "Computer, display the hunting ground." The scene shifted to show a dense forest on a remote world designated as neutral hunting territory. Thick canopy blocked most sunlight, creating a maze of shadows and undergrowth. Perfect terrain for a proper hunt. "The rules are simple," Zarthik announced to his audience. "The human has been given basic survival equipment, a primitive kinetic weapon, some rations, and crude communication devices. He believes this is a military exercise. I will hunt him with standard Corvan military gear, demonstrating the vast superiority of our technology and training." The camera focused on a reinforced landing pod descending through the atmosphere. Inside, Chief Petty Officer Marcus Chun checked his equipment one final time. He'd been told this was an interspecies military cooperation exercise, a chance to train alongside allied forces. The briefing had been intentionally vague. Marcus was a 12-year veteran of the teams, with deployments across 3 different star systems. He'd learned to adapt quickly to new environments and unfamiliar technology. Something about this mission felt off, but he'd learned to trust his instincts and prepare for anything. The pod landed with a heavy thud, and Marcus stepped out into the alien forest. The gravity was slightly heavier than Earth standard, but manageable. The air was breathable, though it carried unfamiliar scents that made his nostrils flare instinctively above the planet's surface. Zarthik's hunting platform locked onto the human's position. "And now, the demonstration begins," he announced to his viewing audience. "Observe how quickly these primitive bipeds succumb when faced with true military prowess." Marcus activated his comm unit, following the last instructions he'd received. Instead of the expected check-in with command, he heard something that made his blood run cold, an alien voice speaking in accented English. "Human warrior, you have been selected for the honor of demonstrating your species' limitations. I am Huntmaster Zarthik of the Corvan Empire. Your death will be broadcast across the galaxy as a lesson in true military superiority." The communication cut off, but not before Marcus heard something else in the background, the sound of thousands of alien voices, cheering and chattering in anticipation. This wasn't a training exercise. This was a gladiatorial show. Marcus felt the familiar calm settle over him, the same mental state that had kept him alive through countless operations. Fear was useful only if it kept you alert. Panic would get you killed. He'd been set up, but he was still breathing, still armed, and still had his training. "Computer," Zarthik's voice echoed across the forest through hidden speakers. "Initiate hunting protocol. Full sensor sweeps authorized." Immediately, Marcus felt a subtle change in air pressure that indicated active scanning. His equipment started picking up electromagnetic signatures that definitely weren't natural. He was being hunted by something with technology far beyond what he'd trained against. But Marcus had spent 3 years working with the Joint Human-Alien Research Division. He'd learned to recognize the signatures of common galactic technology. More importantly, he'd learned their weaknesses. The first attack came without warning. A bright blue pulse seared the air where Marcus had been standing seconds before. He'd already moved, his instincts triggering at the first sign of targeting lasers. The tree behind him simply ceased to exist, vaporized by energy weapons that should have been impossible. Impressive reflexes for a primitive, Zarthik's voice carried across the forest. But reflexes without proper equipment are merely delayed execution. Marcus was already moving, using every piece of natural cover available. He'd fought in environments where the enemy had overwhelming technological superiority before. The key was turning their advantages against them. Above, camera drones tracked his movement, feeding data to Zarthik's tactical display. The alien warrior's confidence was absolute. His armor could deflect anything the human's primitive kinetic weapons could produce. His sensors could track life signs through solid rock. His energy weapons could eliminate targets at ranges the human couldn't even perceive. Notice how the human attempts to use primitive concealment tactics, Zarthik narrated for his audience. These might work against their own kind, but against Corvan military technology, they are laughably inadequate. Marcus reached the first piece of alien technology he'd been hoping to find: a sensor relay node. Every military force, no matter how advanced, needed communication networks. And networks could be compromised. He pulled out a device that officially didn't exist in any military inventory. 3 years of cross-training with alien engineering teams had taught him to recognize common galactic tech standards. More importantly, it had taught him to exploit them. The device attached to the sensor node looked like nothing more than a standard field radio component. In reality, it was a signal interceptor that could piggyback on most galactic communication protocols. Within seconds, it was feeding Marcus a partial view of Zarthik's tactical display. "The human has stopped moving," Zarthik announced with satisfaction. Paralyzed by fear, no doubt. This demonstration will conclude more quickly than anticipated. But Marcus wasn't paralyzed. He was learning. The tactical display showed him the positions of 12 camera drones, the location of Zarthik's hunting platform, and most importantly, the energy signature of the alien's own sensors. Marcus had spent 2 years studying galactic military doctrine as part of humanity's integration into the broader cosmic community. He knew that most species, especially those with overwhelming technological advantages, develop predictable patterns. They relied on their technology to make up for tactical laziness. The next energy pulse came exactly where Marcus had calculated it would. But he wasn't there anymore. Instead, he was 30 meters to the side, having moved using a route that kept him in the sensor shadows created by the alien's own equipment. "What?" Zarthik's voice carried a note of surprise. "Computer, explain how the target avoided our targeting lock." Marcus was already moving toward his next objective, one of the lower flying camera drones. These weren't just recording devices. They were part of Zarthik's sensor network. Take out enough of them, and even the most advanced warrior would start fighting blind. The drone was designed to be undetectable by primitive sensors. Unfortunately for Zarthik, Marcus wasn't using primitive sensors anymore. His hijacked data feed showed him exactly where each drone was positioned. Marcus took careful aim with his rifle, not at the drone itself, but at a specific point 3 meters to its left. He squeezed the trigger, and the kinetic round struck exactly where he'd intended. It ricocheted off a tree trunk with precisely calculated force, and struck the drone's main sensor cluster. The explosion lit up the forest canopy. One of Zarthik's sensors went dark. "Impossible," Zarthik snarled. Primitive kinetic weapons cannot track Corvan military technology. But Marcus hadn't tracked it. He'd simply understood physics better than his opponent expected. Every species in the galaxy might have different technology, but they all had to obey the same basic laws of motion and energy transfer. "Computer, increase scanning intensity. Deploy backup sensor platforms." Marcus smiled grimly. More sensors meant more electromagnetic signature to work with. Every piece of technology Zarthik deployed made him easier to track, not harder. The alien warrior was beginning to realize that this hunt wasn't proceeding according to plan. His audience of millions was watching a human, a supposedly primitive human, demonstrate capabilities that shouldn't exist. Marcus reached the second relay node and installed another interceptor. Now he had access to nearly 60% of Zarthik's sensor network. The alien thought he was hunting a blind prey animal. In reality, Marcus was systematically taking control of the battlefield. "The human continues to display unusual resilience," Zarthik announced, his voice tighter than before. "But resilience without proper firepower remains futile." The next attack wasn't a single pulse, but a sustained barrage that turned 3 acres of forest into a smoking crater. Zarthik had decided to stop playing with his prey, but Marcus wasn't in the crater. He was 200 meters away, moving through a row. Zarthik's hunting platform shuddered as another system went offline. The massive Corvan warrior stood before his command console, watching red warning indicators multiply across his tactical display. This wasn't how the demonstration was supposed to proceed. "Citizens of the collective," he addressed his increasingly confused audience. "The human appears to have some understanding of basic galactic technology. This merely prolongs the inevitable outcome." But privately, Zarthik was beginning to feel something he hadn't experienced in decades of hunting uncertainty. His prey had somehow learned to use Corvan military equipment against him. Worse, the humans seemed to understand weaknesses in the technology that Zarthik himself didn't know existed. Down in the forest, Marcus moved through the undergrowth with calculated precision. The hijacked sensor data had given him something invaluable real-time: knowledge of his opponent's position and capabilities. But more than that, it had shown him the tactical pattern that would be Zarthik's downfall. The alien warrior thought like a predator, but he thought like a predator that had never been prey. Every move he made followed standard Corvan military doctrine, predictable to anyone who'd studied galactic warfare patterns. Marcus had spent 18 months in advanced strategic analysis courses specifically designed to understand non-human military thinking. Marcus reached the third sensor, relay, and paused. This one was different: heavier encryption, better shielding, clearly more important than the others. Through his borrowed access to the network, he could see this relay controlled Zarthik's primary tracking systems, instead of simply hijacking it. Marcus had a better idea. He pulled out his survival kit and removed what looked like standard human emergency rations. In reality, these were specially designed for cross-species operations, with chemical compositions that remained stable across different atmospheric conditions. More importantly, they contained compounds that could interfere with most galactic sensor technologies if properly deployed. Marcus carefully opened 3 ration packs and spread their contents around the relay in a specific pattern. To any galactic scanner, it would look like simple, organic matter, nothing worth investigating. But when heated to the right temperature, the chemical interaction would create an electromagnetic pulse perfectly tuned to overload Corvan. Sensor arrays. He rigged his only explosive device as a timer and moved to a safe distance. When the charge detonated, it wouldn't destroy the relay. Instead, it would heat the scattered ration compounds to exactly the temperature needed for his improvised EMP device. The explosion came 30 seconds later. Zarthik's primary sensors didn't just go offline. They sent a feedback pulse through his entire network that temporarily blinded every piece of scanning equipment he had. "What is happening?" Zarthik roared at his computer. "Explain the system failure." "Unable to comply," the computer responded. "Primary sensor array has suffered cascading feedback failure. Backup sensors operating at 12% efficiency." For the first time in the hunt, Zarthik was effectively blind. Marcus was already moving toward his next objective. Through the dying sensor network, he'd identified something crucial: the power coupling that fed energy to Zarthik's hunting platform. It was shielded, protected, and theoretically impossible for ground forces to reach. Theoretically, Marcus had noticed something during his analysis of the galactic technology. The Corvans, like most advanced species, had designed their equipment to be absolutely secure against threats they understood. They'd made it impossible for any known weapon to penetrate the platform's shielding, but they'd never considered that someone might not try to penetrate it at all. The power coupling drew energy from the platform's main reactor and channeled it through a series of quantum conduits to various systems. The conduits were protected by multi-layered shielding that could deflect planet-killing weapons. But they still had to obey the basic laws of physics. Every energy transfer created heat. Heat had to be dissipated, and heat dissipation required thermal exhaust ports. Marcus had spent 6 months training with human engineers who specialized in reverse engineering alien technology. He'd learned that thermal management was the weakness of every advanced system because it was the one area where physics couldn't be circumvented through superior technology. He found the thermal exhaust array exactly where his knowledge of galactic engineering principles told him it would be: a series of carefully positioned vents that allowed excess heat from the power coupling to dissipate into the atmosphere. The vents were too small for conventional weapons and too well shielded for energy attacks. But they weren't designed to handle certain specific chemical reactions. Marcus opened his remaining rations and began a careful chemistry experiment. Human emergency rations contained compounds that were harmless separately but became highly reactive when combined in specific proportions. Mixed properly, they would create a thermite-like reaction that burned at precisely the temperature needed to overload thermal regulation systems. He packed the mixture into the largest exhaust vent and rigged his final timer. When this detonated, it wouldn't damage the power coupling directly. Instead, it would force the coupling safety systems to shut down main power to prevent catastrophic overheating. Zafek would lose his energy weapons, his advanced sensors, and his gravitational controls. His hunting platform would become a very expensive falling brick. The chemical reaction began exactly on schedule. Deep within the platform's power systems, thermal sensors detected critical overheating. Automatic safety protocols engaged, cutting power to non-essential systems to prevent reactor breach. Zarthik's command console went dark. "Emergency power only," the computer announced. "Primary systems offline? Recommend immediate platform evacuation." "No." Zarthik slammed his armored fist into the console. "This is impossible. Human technology cannot threaten Corvan military systems." But it wasn't human technology. It was human understanding of universal physical principles, combined with Corvan technology turned against itself. Marcus had spent 3 years learning to think like a galactic engineer, and 12 years learning to fight like a human warrior. The combination was proving devastating. Above the forest, Zarthik's platform began losing altitude. The gravitational compensators were offline, leaving only emergency repulsors to maintain position. The mighty hunter found himself dealing with something he'd never experienced before: equipment failure in the middle of combat. Down in the forest, Marcus was implementing the next phase of his plan. With Zarthik's sensors offline and his platform crippled, the alien warrior would have to come down to ground level to continue the hunt. That was exactly what Marcus wanted. Ground combat was where human training excelled. Every major human military force had learned to fight in environments where the enemy had technological superiority. It was humanity's specialty. Marcus began setting up what soldiers called a technological ambush, using the enemy's own equipment to create a killing field. He'd identified 7 pieces of Corvan technology still operational in the forest: backup sensors, communication relays, and automated defensive systems that Zarthik had deployed as insurance. Each piece of equipment operated on the same basic principles, with the same basic weaknesses, and each one could be turned into a weapon if you understood the underlying physics. The first sensor array became an improvised flashbang grenade. Marcus overloaded its scanning emitters, creating a burst of electromagnetic energy that would temporarily blind anyone wearing advanced visual enhancement systems. The second became a concussion device. Its gravitational sensors reversed to create a localized pressure wave strong enough to disorient even heavily armored opponents. The third, fourth, and fifth became directed energy weapons. Their communication transmitters focused into narrow beam emissions that could overload unshielded electronics. By the time Marcus finished his preparations, he turned Zarthik's own defensive network into a collection of booby traps designed specifically to exploit the weaknesses of Corvan military equipment. The Alien Hunter had never faced an opponent who could turn his advantages into liabilities. ZA platform touched down in a forest clearing with an impact that shattered trees and sent wildlife fleeing. The massive alien warrior emerged from his disabled ship wearing full combat armor and carrying weapons that could level city blocks, but he was no longer hunting from a position of technological superiority. He was walking into a battlefield prepared by someone who understood his equipment better than he did. Human! Zarthik's voice boomed through the forest, amplified by his armor's external speakers. Face me directly. Your primitive sabotage only delays the inevitable. Marcus didn't respond. Psychological warfare was another area where human military doctrine excelled. Every species, no matter how advanced, could be affected by uncertainty and fear. Zarthik had started this hunt feeling completely confident. Now he was confused, frustrated, and beginning to doubt his own superiority. That doubt would be his weakness. The first trap triggered when Zarthik stepped into the prepared killing field. The modified sensor array released its stored electromagnetic energy in a brilliant flash that overloaded his visual enhancement systems. The alien warrior stumbled, temporarily blinded, as his armor systems struggled to compensate. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched their viewing screens in stunned silence. The mighty Zarthik terror of a dozen star systems stood in the middle of a primitive forest with his armor sparking and his weapons offline. Facing him was a human soldier who shouldn't have been able to understand galactic technology, let alone turn it into weapons. The impossible was happening before their eyes. Zarthik struggled to process what had occurred. His entire worldview had been built on Corvan technological superiority. His species had conquered half the galaxy through better weapons, better armor, better everything. Now, a primitive human had dismantled all of it using nothing but clever thinking and improvised chemistry. This cannot be real, Zarthik muttered, his voice caught by the few remaining camera drones that still functioned. Human brains are too simple to comprehend Corvan technology. Marcus stepped closer, keeping the modified energy weapon trained on his opponent. You're making the same mistake your entire species makes, he said quietly. You think technology equals intelligence, but technology is just tools. Intelligence is knowing how to use them. Throughout the galaxy, translation systems carried Marcus's words to species that had never considered the distinction. In the Andorian council chambers, military strategists sat forward in their seats. On the crystalline worlds of the Vegan Empire, philosophers began urgent discussions. Even the ancient ethereals paused their meditations to observe this unprecedented event. A supposedly primitive human was delivering a lesson in tactical thinking to one of the galaxy's premier warriors. You studied my species before this hunt, Marcus continued. Circling slowly around the crippled alien, you learned about our weapons, our standard tactics, our usual responses to superior technology. But you never studied what makes us dangerous. Zarthik tried to activate his backup systems, but every circuit was fried from Marcus's electromagnetic attacks. His massive frame, impressive as it was, meant nothing without the technology that enhanced it. What makes you dangerous? Zarthik demanded, though his voice carried less authority than before. Marcus smiled, and the expression was visible to millions of galactic viewers through the broadcasting equipment that was somehow still functioning. Despite the systematic destruction of most other systems, we adapt, Marcus said simply. Every species you've hunted before had their own technology, their own familiar tools. When you took away their advantages, they had nothing left. But humans? We learned to use everyone else's tools. We trained ourselves to think like every other species in the galaxy. Marcus gestured to the devastated clearing around them. Every piece of equipment you brought here was designed by species that think in predictable patterns. Kovans build for maximum power efficiency. Oldurans design for elegance and aesthetic appeal. Centaurians focus on redundant safety systems. Once you understand the thinking, you can exploit the weaknesses. Across the galaxy, military academies began recording this conversation for future study. The human was revealing strategic thinking that most species had never considered. Zarthik made a desperate lunge forward, relying on his natural strength and combat training. But Marcus had spent 12 years fighting opponents who were stronger, faster, or better equipped than he was. The aliens' attack was powerful but clumsy, telegraphed by someone who'd relied on technological advantages for too long. Marcus sidestepped easily and triggered another of his prepared traps. The modified communication relay sent a focused electromagnetic pulse directly into Zarthik's neural interface. The alien warrior collapsed, his consciousness temporarily overloaded by feedback from his own equipment. "The thing about hunting intelligent prey," Marcus said conversationally, speaking as much to the galactic audience as to his defeated opponent, "is that eventually the prey starts hunting back?" He knelt beside Zarthik and began systematically removing the alien's remaining functional equipment. Each piece was designed to be impossible to remove without proper authorization codes, but Marcus had spent months learning Corvan engineering principles. He knew exactly which components to target to bypass security systems. "Computer," Marcus said to Zarthik's armor AI, "initiate emergency medical protocol and disable all weapon systems." "Authorization not recognized," the computer replied. "Override code Theta-97 Alpha." Marcus responded calmly. The computer paused for several seconds. "Override accepted. Weapon systems disabled. Medical monitoring active." Across the galaxy, Corvan military observers sat in shocked silence. A human had just used their own emergency protocols against them. Somehow, this primitive soldier had learned their highest-level security codes, but Marcus hadn't learned the codes. He'd simply understood the logic behind them. Emergency medical protocols in any species followed predictable patterns based on biological priorities. The override code was always a variation of the same mathematical sequence because in true emergencies, complexity got people killed. Marcus stood and addressed the camera drones directly. "My name is Chief Petty Officer Marcus Chun, United States Navy. I was brought here under false pretenses for what I was told was a training exercise. Instead, I found myself in a gladiatorial show designed to demonstrate human inferiority." His voice carried steady authority as he continued. "I want to make something clear to everyone watching this broadcast. This outcome wasn't because I'm exceptional among humans. This happened because humanity has spent the last 5 years preparing for exactly this kind of situation." The statement sent shock waves through galactic intelligence services. Earth's military capabilities had been consistently underestimated by every major species. If this human was representative of standard human training rather than exceptional ability, then every strategic assessment needed immediate revision. "When humanity joined the galactic community," Marcus explained, "we were assigned the role of junior partner because of our supposedly primitive technology. But we used that status to observe and learn from every species we encountered. While you were all convinced we were harmless, we were studying your weaknesses." Marcus pulled out a device that looked like a standard human communication unit but had been modified with components from Zarthik's own equipment. "This contains detailed records of everything that happened here today. Every technique used, every vulnerability exploited, every tactical decision made. This information will be transmitted to Earth immediately." He paused and looked directly into the nearest camera drone. "More importantly, similar information about every major galactic military force has already been collected and analyzed. Humanity knows exactly how to defeat any species in the galaxy using your own technology against you." The claim was staggering in its implications. If true, it meant that Earth, supposedly the weakest military power in known space, had actually been conducting the most sophisticated intelligence operation in galactic history. Zarthik struggled to consciousness, his neural interface finally clearing from the electromagnetic feedback. He looked up at the human standing over him and saw something that chilled him to his core. Marcus wasn't gloating or angry. He was calm, professional, and completely confident. This was a soldier who had just proved his superiority and was already thinking about the next mission. "You cannot threaten the entire galaxy," Zarthik whispered. I'm not threatening anyone, Marcus replied. I'm delivering a message. Humanity requests to be treated as equals in the galactic community. If that request is denied, then humanity will demonstrate why equality is preferable to the alternatives. Marcus activated his modified communication device. Earth Command, this is Chen. Mission parameters have changed. Recommend immediate implementation of Protocol 7. The transmission reached Earth faster than should have been possible with human technology. But Marcus was no longer using purely human technology. He was using a hybrid system that combined human innovation with galactic engineering principles to create something neither species could have built alone across the galaxy. Intelligence agencies began urgent reassessments of Earth's capabilities. If humans could modify alien technology this extensively, then every assumption about their limitations was wrong. Marcus looked down at Zarthik one final time. You wanted to demonstrate military superiority to your audience. Congratulations, you succeeded. Unfortunately for you, you demonstrated human military superiority instead of Corvin. He turned to address the camera drones directly. To all species watching this broadcast, humanity offers the following proposal: mutual respect and cooperation based on each species' unique strengths. We don't want to conquer anyone. We just want to be treated as equals. Marcus paused and his expression became harder. But if anyone decides to test human resolve again, remember what happened here today. Zarthik had every possible advantage: superior technology, better weapons, knowledge of the terrain, and complete tactical surprise. He still lost to a single human soldier using nothing but standard training and improvised equipment. The implications were clear. If one human could defeat the galaxy's premier hunter using improvised tactics, what could organized human military forces accomplish with proper preparation? Marcus began walking toward Zarthik's disabled platform. Computer, are your communication systems still functional? Affirmative, the platform's AI replied. Long R?